In teaching League of Legends, we are often faced with a very difficult dilemma. We can watch, play, and learn from the challenger perspective, which often involves advanced strategies, split-second decision-making, and more importantly, team coordination. But unfortunately, that last point is often not really in the cards for most of us. Common ideas like pushing and roaming just have way too much risk and low elo. The reality is that in order for roams to really be effective, you do need some amount of cooperation. Your teammates need to play around the fact that you're coming to help, and more often than not, you're just going to waste your time when doing anything that involves sacrificing your own lane to help out your team. So what works in challenger games just often doesn't work in low elo. Since you're the only person that you can control and trust, involving as few people as possible and just focusing on making yourself as powerful as you can be will always give the best results. So the optimal strategy for climbing out of low elo is to just stomp your lane and stomp it hard. Because of this, we're going to talk about a tactic that I use when smurfing to always win my lanes. This idea will be relevant for all laners, and it's something that works, even when you're playing bot lane or even when you're just the support. So we're going to be using examples from the support perspective to showcase this. And if you want to be ahead of the meta with guides just like this one that are exclusive to our members, then you should definitely check out Skillcapped after this. It's famous for how stupidly effective our guides are, and we're also known as the only service that offers a rank up guarantee. Because our service works, and we believe you shouldn't pay if you don't climb while actively using Skillcapped. So check us out after this. When wave control gets brought up, it's often seen as a scary and complicated subject that needs 150 IQ points to fully comprehend. And while it definitely is a very deep topic that you could literally write a PhD thesis on, we definitely don't need that level of understanding to get to Diamond. What we do need is an easily replicable and repeatable tactic that you can use to win games. We're not trying to make an all-encompassing guide on wave control, but we can tell you exactly how to abuse it and your low elo opponents to dominate solo queue. Let's look at a Soraka game that I played recently for an example. The first part of your game plan should always be to get a push advantage. 99% of the time, you do not need your ADC to do anything to help you with this. Notice how when I see Ezreal use Q, I walk up to look to trade, and my ADC is still back farming minions. Ideally, would MF also look to zone with me here? Yes, but it simply doesn't matter. Support players often forget that they have 50% of the agency in the lane, and that means 50% of the wave control too. And if you are doing a good job spacing and using your abilities, support dictates the lane without touching the wave anyways. You can see now that Ezreal doesn't have access to hit the wave at all, and my ADC does. Even if MF doesn't know to try and get the push, her naturally going for last hits while Ezreal loses time on the wave means that we will get the advantage regardless. You can see that even as I'm going for my level 2 all-in, my ADC isn't close enough to really participate. But this strategy isn't team reliant for this exact reason. My 2v1 here just serves to allow us to maintain our push lead. We don't really care if we actually get a kill or not. Once you've established this lead, what you want to do is slow push a wave into the opponent's tower, and then look to do one of two things. If you aren't much higher health than your opponents, or you do have enough gold to buy items and potions, just recall. If executed correctly, you'll have a lane state that looks pretty similar to this upon getting back. We like to call this a rebound. If you didn't have time to or didn't manage to get the recall off for whatever reason, allow the wave to rebound back to this state regardless. Now from here, we have two main goals. First, thinning the wave, and second, harassing or all-inning our opponents. So what do I mean when I say thinning the wave? This essentially just refers to setting up the wave to maintain a freeze. By definition, a freeze just refers to a wave that can be maintained in one spot indefinitely. Again, there are lots of complicated rules and variables that are in play to determining if you can actually freeze a wave, including what your ADC does, what the enemy does, and other things that are just going to be out of your control. But in general, there is one thing that you can aim to do that will make it way easier. Count the number and kinds of minions that you have and compare it with your opponent's wave. There are 3 different kinds of minions: melee, cannon, and range creeps. All of them serve different purposes and have different damage values and health totals, but the most important and relevant to maintaining a freeze are the range creeps. You can think of them as the driving force behind waves pushing. We want every other kind of minion to be relatively equal, but to have at least 3 or more range minions on the enemy side at all times. If we look at this example, we can see that we have 3 range creeps, a cannon, and 2 melees. And our opponents, well, they have a lot more than that. Any time that I can't be trading with my opponents, I want to use that time to match their push and trim the wave down to make it more difficult for them to crash into our tower. You can see that I occasionally auto the wave here and look for Q poke that also hits the wave to aid in that goal. But why am I even doing this, and what does it accomplish? Well, if you were to ask anyone what's the number one reason they lose lane, what will they do? That's right, blame the jungler. However, if you hold the lane in a position like this, it's basically impossible to gank. And if you remember what I mentioned at the start of this guide, we want to involve as few people as possible. If the enemy jungler never comes because we can't be ganked, it's much more likely that we'll win the lane. Additionally, it also aids for your own jungler or other laners to roam to gank for you, because this is a very dire spot to be in for your opponents. In the example game, our jungler does come down, but rushes the gank, and because of it, we don't get the kill. However, the whole point of this is that you really don't need your teammates to play optimally in order to have this strategy work. We've set up a perfect storm to where our opponents just don't have a good play. All the prep we did earlier wasn't arbitrary. Pushing and recalling gave us an item and health advantage, something we wanted in order to leverage our strength in the lane. If we didn't have that item or health lead, we wouldn't have the resources to actually hold the freeze. A common question that gets brought up when I first explain this idea is, why don't we just let our opponents shove at level 1 and then freeze on them? But in that case, they would hit level 2 first. You wouldn't have an item advantage, and there's basically no way you would be strong enough to stop them from actually full crashing the wave. In short, to freeze, you need some sort of advantage. But in this situation, with extra health and items, it's not unrealistic to see how we could just run our opponents down here even without help. Second, a frozen wave like this puts your opponent in a position where they cannot ignore it. Let's think of the alternative to this. Even if we had a big item lead, if we just constantly shoved the wave to our opponent's tower, they would still get as much CS and experience as we do, and could just wait patiently for their CS delivery every 30 seconds or so. If the enemy's wave is always pushing to us, they're going to be forced to not only overextend to access that wave, but they have to interact with whoever is on the other side if they want to break the freeze. You can see exactly what happens when the person getting frozen on doesn't interact for whatever reason. I hold the wave by tanking aggro and then just drag it outside of tower range. Just look at how much CS Ezreal and Yuumi miss here by not walking up. They take a recall and then come back, losing a few waves in the process. If you know of the even minion rule, some of you may have noticed that this wave isn't frozen anymore, even though we had the perfect storm mode and advantage as well as a supposedly frozen wave. So what gives? Once again, there are some things that are just out of your control. Your ADC last hitting when the minions have tons of health to spare, or just randomly auto-attacking isn't something that you can change. You can do your best to communicate through pings and typing, but that's only going to get you so far. The nice thing about this strategy though is that from this spot, you're still ungankable, and there's plenty of time for the wave to build up to give you another advantage. While your opponents may have recalled and equalized the item and health advantage you had moments ago, a big wave in itself is an advantage, and it's the whole reason why we had to recall earlier to stop our opponents from crashing it. Now we're going to start building up a big wave of our own to try this strategy all over again. At this point, don't auto the wave at all and focus solely on distracting the opposing team from killing your wave. When you've got those 2 waves stacked up, now is the time to start spamming autos and abilities to get it under the tower. My ADC is able to take a base while I distract, and again regain the item and health advantage. If I had felt like I had better items to buy or was lower on HP, I probably would have been a bit safer with my base location, but I opted to try and get Spell Thief procs off of Yuumi instead. This time, instead of my jungler coming to help, I get roamed on by the enemy mid laner who, even after using 17 million dashes, still can't kill me. Okay, slightly exaggerated, but why is this guy going over so many walls? Note that this location is pretty much ungankable, and it's a huge reason why we want the wave to keep here for the majority of the game. You may not be able to control how many ganks you do get, but you can control how often you die to them. And now we can just go back to the regular scheduled programming. We hold this wave here for a long time, And again, we can see how hard Ezreal struggles to get CS while we're just coasting along completely unfazed. Once we do inevitably break the freeze again, rinse and repeat. Slow build the wave, crash, recall, and come back to a rebounded wave that we can do the exact same thing on again. You don't need your teammates to play perfectly to execute this. Over time, your small advantages in terms of gold, XP, health, and overall resources will add up. And at some point, your opponents are going to get so frustrated that they feel like you're an immovable wall that just won't get out of their way, and they're going to get really annoyed and try and kill you. Except, they're going to be down way too many advantages to actually win the fight. I didn't even have R for this, and it's not close at all. The enemy jungler shows up, and we even managed to outplay that too. Remember again that this is a low elo ADC. I'm just playing Soraka here. I'm not doing anything insane, and neither is my AD. This is something that low elo players can pull off consistently because all the numbers are going to be in your favor from the start. The whole point of a strategy like this is that it's repeatable and works even when teammates mess things up. If it works in bot lane where you have an unpredictable lane partner, well, it's even more effective in solo lanes where you can completely manipulate the wave in its entirety. Point being, wave control is really overpowered, and your opponents are not going to know what to do against someone that is using it to their advantage. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.